I wish YZ would play Eldar. I always think faction wars are cooler. Helps really with the immersion. Immersion's pretty key in 40k. I love it.
Reading you understood. I shall claim the node for the chapter. Scouts ready. My fury knows no bounds. Ready for squad on the move. Moving out.
Those who hold fast to the Emperor.
His eyes flicked across the cavern floor, blinking between grounded gunships. Iron warriors were dropping a scroll with data. The engines were all battle deployment. He saw the sickle blade, the green and black of her fuselage, a crow amongst the brushed metal of the iron warriors. Lights winked on the tips of her wings. A tracked servitor was uncoupling fuel lines from her belly. Part of him thanked the now-dead Yalen for his preparation. He quickened his pace. He felt eyes and sensor blisters turn towards him. The downwash glow of thrusters caught his sea green and black armor. High above, a wing of lightning crows breached the shield and roared into the dark. He swung under the wing. Further away, an iron warrior in a spider-limbed servo rig paused and looked towards them. The tracked servitor was backing away. Its steel limbs snapped inspection plates shut, pulling pins from the weapon systems. Sotanul and Prophesius were climbing the rear ramp. He reached the ladder hanging beneath the cockpit, gripped and swung up in a single movement. Mag clamps latched onto the power pack on his back and pulled him into the cockpit. Neural connections fizzed live with a tingle of static. Displays within the cockpit began to scroll with data. The engines woke. Power thrummed through the frame. His hands were moving without his thinking. The canopy closed over him. He could see data from the hangar's launch control. Out beyond the armored crystal of the canopy, the Iron Warrior with the servo rig was moving closer, picking up speed. Whatever luck or plan had got them this far, it was about to run out. Red warning runes began to pulse in his view. He could see other figures running now. The space above the canopy was a flow of ascending aircraft. Figures with weaponry were moving across the cavern floor. Heavy bolters, claviers, missile launchers. He blinked system control markers, overriding cutouts as they flashed back warnings. The sickle blade's weapon systems woke. The power in the engines was rising, vibrating through him. Machine voices began to shout in his ears, telling him to power the craft down, telling him that he was not cleared to launch. Iron warriors were dropping into cover across the launch pad. Over the neural connection to the gunship, he felt their rangefinders touch the sickle blade. They felt like cold needles. He glanced upwards. The swarm of machines was still rising and rising. He looked down again. A voice was speaking in his helm, telling him to power his machine down.
"We are ready,"
said Sotanul's voice in his ear. He nodded, keyed a control, and squeezed the firing trigger on the control column. The sickle blade was a storm eagle. Tens of thousands of its breed served in the Great Crusade, and now in the Civil War which had replaced it. But the sickle blade was more than a machine of war. She and her 10 sisters had been born in the forges of Mars and given to the sons of Horus as an honor gift. Masters had crafted each part of her. The gold feathers traced across her back and wings had been the work of one of the most gifted artisans, and the hand of the fabricator general himself had woken her machine spirit. She was a queen of her kind, and a queen made to fly through winds of fire and destruction. The twinned heavy bolters in her chin spat fire. Explosions swallowed the iron warriors as Argonis untethered sickle blade's thrusters. She lifted off the launch pad, still breathing fire. A beam of light flicked out from across the platform, skimming her left wing. Argonis pivoted the gunship in midair. The line of fire traced across the platform edge and soared through the shooter. Brass casings cascaded from the gunship's cheeks. Argonis's senses were a wall of target runes. The cavern floor was alive with frantic movement. More troops, more guns, less and less chance of survival. As soon as he had seen the Iron Warriors move to stop them, he had known that there was only one way out. Havoc. He turned his gaze on a fuel bowser and blinked the target rune. The line of shells flicked sideways and touched the fuel canister. A sheet of flame spilled out in every direction, burning white and rage red. Argonis felt the sickle blade rock. His eyes flicked across the cavern floor, blinking between grounded gunships, munition stacks, and fuel cells. Rockets loosened from Sickle Blade's back. Fire clouds thumped into the air, racing upwards to brush the craft hovering above. One column of fire slammed into the belly of a strike fighter. The craft rose, twisted, flipped over, and struck the cavern wall. Argonis pushed power into the engines, and the Sickle Blade rose through the inferno. Beams of light and lines of shells cut the air beneath her. He paused for a second, holding the breath in his lungs as the power in the engines became a shackled scream. The Sickle Blade tilted its nose up, still floating above the sea of fire and smoke. Argonis saw the stacked aircraft above. Some had halted, while others still rose to the dark beyond. He unchained the engine's power, and they shot upwards. G-force punched him in the gut. Inside his helm, he smiled. Iron Warrior's craft was streaming past, and he was an arrow spinning through them, spiraling higher and higher. The atmospheric shield was around them, and then past them, and they were shooting high into Talon's night. Clones, thought Io, as she stared up at Yeager. Perhaps, he said, and shook his head. The Hydra has many heads. She blinked, and facts came together in her pain-streaked thoughts. Yes, he said again, as though in reply. I'm in your thoughts. One. She fought the word from her lips. One less head now. Yelan's eyes hardened, the tattoos unfolded across his skin. I thought your kind was created not to feel emotional pleasure at anything but a completed kill. You have no idea what I am. You're an assassin of the Vanus Temple, an infocyte operating under an unbound condition. He smiled, a pleased and cruel smile. You didn't think that the temples were unknown to the 20th, did you? We are the Alpha. We were there while your masters were still killing for coin. Data, pride, the need for the defeated to acknowledge their superiority, a compulsive need for complexity and showmanship, all qualities of the Alpha Legion psychological pattern. But you've been out here and active for quite a while, haven't you? He asked. You're not really built for that, are you? The conditioning is probably framed by now. You probably have started making mistakes. You have made an error, Io. You have made an error, Io. You have made an error, Io. Of course you've made an error. Yelan's eyes narrowed. Io. The current situation is that error manifested. She closed her eyes and tried to will her limbs to move. Fresh pain was the only answer. She managed to roll onto her side. Blood began to dribble from the right-hand side of her mouth. She could see her visor lying on the metal grating just an arm reach away. She also saw the two other people she had heard. They were Alpha Legionnaires, but they wore compact recon armor. One held a fat-barreled needle rifle, the other a block-framed assault shotgun. Both had near identical faces. They were not looking at her, but holding guard with the relaxed carelessness of poised predators. She tried to move her hand towards her visor. It moved a few centimeters, and then the ice needles hardened in her nerves and her hand froze.
That's far enough, said Yalen. How did I allow this to happen? Thought Io. Because to err is human, said Yalen. And no matter what your clade gave to you, that is still all you are. No, she thought. No, that is not right.
Projections exploded in her head from memory, uncoiling into awareness from where she had buried them in hidden parts of her brain. They were vast, beautiful chains of probability and possibility, of data inputted and data changed and pushed back into the world to do its work. Yalen was frowning now, tattooed scales twisting and shimmering. She could feel the fingers of his mind in her thoughts now, cold fingers scrabbling to follow the exploding network of the full termination projection that she had created. She allowed a smile onto her face. It was not natural. She had to imitate it from memory, but it fitted the moment well enough.
Thank you,
she thought, and saw in his eyes that he heard.
Thank you for being so predictable.
And she showed him what she had done, the manipulations she had hidden from him in her mind. There was just enough time for his pupils to bloom wide before the Iron Warrior's security detail blasted onto the gantry and the first shot split the air. The machines of war came from across the northern reaches of Talon. First hundreds, then thousands, then more than a mortal mind could count. They poured out of the buried shelters, long rivers of tanks, flowing down broken roads across hills and plains. Knights, dreadnoughts, and titans walked with them, striding amongst the flow of armor like men wading through a deep river. All flowed down into the plateau which spread across the heart of Talon's northern continent. Bound by mountains, the Khedive was a great flat dish of land which had swallowed the blood of many since the battle for Talon had begun. Now the full strength of the Loyalists poured into it without cease. The Crescent City shelter emptied every machine which could move onto the plain, surging to meet the transporters which dropped from orbit to spill more and more machines onto the fog-veiled dust. More and more began to arrive, as the vanguards of forces which had ridden for days began to converge. Many stretched for hundreds of kilometers back across the continent. On the plain of Khedive, the gathering forces marshaled, ordering themselves and pushing outwards as more arrived. Vanguard forces of skimmers took the mountain passes above the plateau unopposed, and within hours the first formations of heavier machines were grinding towards them. The rising sea of iron did not go unopposed. At the edge of the northern polar cap, 3 Iron Warriors' strike flights hit a convoy heading south from the Kobolak shelter. The front 5 kilometers of the convoy became a burning grave of machines. Minutes later, 3 Iron Warriors' war groups hit the paralyzed line of tanks from the side. Their convoy was annihilated. Its fate screamed across the sky in an orange curtain. To the south, the rising sea of iron did not go unopposed. At the edge of the northern polar cap, 3 Iron Warriors strike flights hit a convoy heading south from the Kobolak shelter. The front 5 kilometers of the convoy became a burning grave of machines. Minutes later, 3 Iron Warriors war groups hit the paralyzed line of tanks from the side. Their convoy was annihilated. Its fate screamed across the sky in an orange curtain. To the south, a scratch force of Iron Warriors, Cassidnal armor, and Cyberneticae maniples met a column coming from Essenes shelter, advancing down the remains of the northern arterial highway. The two forces met front on. The long snakes of machines broke apart, spreading across the land to either side of the highway as they each sought to encircle their enemies. An hour after the first Loyalists took the passes above the Khedive, the Iron Warriors struck back. Bombers and gunships poured explosives down on the mountain tops. Rock shattered under the rolling drum of explosions and the heat of the firestorm. Avalanches of cooling rock slid from the peaks and roared down their flanks. Thunderhawks and Stormbirds skimmed the detonation wave to drop armored units into the passes. 3 Iron Warriors war groups hit the paralyzed line of tanks from the side. Their convoy was annihilated. Its fate screamed across the sky in an orange curtain. To the south, a scratch force of Iron Warriors, Cassidnal armor, and Cyberneticae maniples met a column coming from Essenes shelter, advancing down the remains of the northern arterial highway. The two forces met front on. The long snakes of machines broke apart, spreading across the land to either side of the highway as they each sought to encircle their enemies. An hour after the first Loyalists took the passes above the Khedive, the Iron Warriors struck back. Bombers and gunships poured explosives down on the mountain tops. Rock shattered under the rolling drum of explosions and the heat of the firestorm. Avalanches of cooling rock slid from the peaks and roared down their flanks. Thunderhawks and Stormbirds skimmed the detonation wave to drop armored units into the passes. Those few of the Loyalist vanguard units remaining fought on, but it was not enough. The Iron Warriors held the passes between the rising sea of Loyalists and the sightless Warren. In the strategiums of the sightless Warren, the Iron Warriors watched their enemy gather and saw the greatest opportunity for victory and defeat unfold before them. If they thought which of the two possibilities was more likely, that part, spreading across the land to either side of the highway as they each sought to encircle their enemies. An hour after the first Loyalists took the passes above the Khedive, the Iron Warriors struck back. Bombers and gunships poured explosives down on the mountain tops. Rock shattered under the rolling drum of explosions and the heat of the firestorm. Avalanches of cooling rock slid from the peaks and roared down their flanks. Thunderhawks and Stormbirds skimmed the detonation wave to drop armored units into the passes. Those few of the Loyalist vanguard units remaining fought on, but it was not enough. The Iron Warriors held the passes between the rising sea of Loyalists and the sightless Warren. In the strategiums of the sightless Warren, the Iron Warriors watched their enemy gather and saw the greatest opportunity for victory and defeat unfold before them. If they thought which of the two possibilities was more likely, none of them voiced their opinion. They waited for word from Perturabo, still in the void aboard the Iron Blood. When that word came, it was as direct as it was brutally simple.
Strike now with all strength. Hold them to the plains. choke them in dead iron.
His sons heard their Primarch and obeyed. Chapter 13. Storm Center. Curse us. Sickle Blade. Cord stared down the sight. The oil-black shape of the Iron Hand's predator was to his left. Both it and War Anvil had come to a halt as soon as they had crested the last line of hills and seen what waited for them on the plains of Khedive. The storm was a pale band across the dying land. Dark smudges rolled within it, like bruises forming, then fading in minutes. Lightning speckled its height. He could see the winds whipping its edges into blurred gauze. It was a great beast of a storm. He could feel the hairs on his neck and arms rising. Sparks of static were pinging off the hull, and there was something else. Something that clung to the colors, and even to the stale taste of the air in his breathe mask. He had never believed in gods or supernatural forces. He had seen psychers and the impossibility they could make possible, but that was nothing more than something he did not understand, a subset of the many things which made the stars burn and time pass. The universe was a cold, uncaring machine, and humanity had only the place it could carve out for itself. Goodness, evil, kindness, and cruelty. It was simply a matter of selecting belief. That was it. There was nothing more. But as he looked into the storm, he felt as if he were looking at something that he could only express in words that came from the language of myths. It felt like looking into the face of a god.
A vortex, you said Manicius, his voice seeming to harmonize with the static of the vox. I thought you were intending your words to be metaphorical. The storm is spreading outwards and increasing in strength, said Cord. This is an eater, bigger than I have ever heard tell of. Anything that goes in is unlikely to come out. You spent the lives of almost all those under your command to come this far, said Manicius. You had the strength to spend their lives, but not your own.
Cord kept his eye on the wall of rolling dust. Sweat was stinging his eyes. Colonel, I saw something. It was Arrigo, from the position just in front of Cord, his voice breaking through his thoughts. Cord felt the fear recede and become an itch at the back of his skull. The gunner had turned to look back at him, eyes wide and bright behind the lenses of his suit. Had it on the infrasight for a second, then it went. But it was there, a machine.
For certain? Cord asked.
For certain.
We're going in,
he said into the vox, then switched to speak to the rest of War Anvil's crew.
All positions stand by to advance. Weapons ready.
Colonel, the storm, called one of the crew, but he was not listening enough to even recognize their voice.
Advance,
he said. And a second later, War Anvil obeyed his will. The winds closed over them with fingers of air which slammed against the hull and rattled grit on the hatches. Within a minute, they could not see anything with their normal eyes except a swirling layer of dust the color of bruises. Images danced and collapsed on the Auspex screen. The infrasights showed nothing. Every few moments, lightning would split the view through the sight. War Anvil rocked as it ground onwards. Cord was breathing slowly, feeling his heart hammer as he waited for something to appear on the scope. The drill went silent. Harend felt the ground beneath his feet become still. He turned, suddenly aware that he had been drifting. Time had passed as the storm pulled at them. They were at its center, he was certain, but even here they felt its touch. The shapes of the other machines were unmoving, with billowing dust shrouding them and then revealing their shapes again. The heat sick had it on the infrasight for a second, then it went. You had the strength to spend their lives, but not your own. Cord kept his eye on the wall of rolling dust. Sweat was stinging his eyes. Colonel, I saw something. It was Arrigo, from the position just in front of Cord, his voice breaking through his thoughts. Cord felt the fear recede and become an itch at the back of his skull. The gunner had turned to look back at him, eyes wide and bright behind the lenses of his suit. Had it on the infrasight for a second, then it went. But it was there. A machine. For certain? Cord asked. For certain. We're going in, he said into the Vox, then switched to speak to the rest of War Anvil's crew. All positions stand by to advance. Weapons ready. Colonel, the storm, called one of the crew, but he was not listening enough to even recognize their voice. Advance, he said. And a second later, War Anvil obeyed his will. The winds closed over them with fingers of air which slammed against the hull and rattled grit on the hatches.
Let's look at the stats here. Just want to make sure he didn't add a second town center or anything like that. He got the relics, which is good for him, and killed 5 villagers here. These horse archers, just had a hard time dealing with them. Lost a bunch of unit to them. So yeah, when... Let's see. Yeah, just lost everything here, and then it just snowballs. Wasn't able to punish the castle, really. So again, it's kind of a mistiming. When he got his castle, I had a ton of food income. Why not Pro Scout? I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, honestly, early on, I denied his Pro Scout, and I was gathering from deer and boar. But yeah, just don't enjoy Pro Scouting. It's archer spears. Put spears in the control group. Keep them behind the archers. Yeah. I honestly, building spears into a mass of horse archers just feels like they're just gonna be kited to death. But it does mean that I don't have a hard counter for the knights, and when the knights got on top of my archers, that's just a lost fight. That's right, fuck Pro Scouts. It is strong though. I mean, like, realistically, the answer is probably, yeah, I should have gone for my own Pro Scout, because then my eco would have been safe at home. It's hard to Pro Scout against Ruse too. I guess could have had maybe half of the deer packs. Ruse is a tough civ to play against. Farms are safe too, but you build farms and you die, so it's like maybe if I had like 2 TCs or something like that, but maybe 2 TCs could have been no, 2 TCs, it just kills me in early castle. Ruse has too many comps. Yeah, Ruse is just OP. That's why I lost this game. No other reason. No other reasons at all. I did beat this guy before, so we're 1-1. Why don't you go 2 TC? It is hard, because like 2 TC, if I go 2 TC, I just let him get all the deer on the map, right? Because against Ruse, against other civs, yes, but against Ruse, I go 2 TCs. He gets all the deer for free, and he can just get to castle and punish me in early castle before my 2 TC has paid off. Yeah. Malians. Malians, I feel, is a good matchup. I don't know if it is stats wise, but I enjoy playing against Malians. And as I say that, I'm about to get my ass kicked, I bet. But we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Probably some aggression here against Malian. Let's see. Do we have any deer in the back here? That'd be really nice. No deer? Come on. Alright, no deer here. Let's check the other side. His food and gold income is better. Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure how to play this matchup against Rus. Maybe going for my own pro scouts is probably the way to counter it. Alt F4. That's got a nice amount of sheep, but I dropped off some sheep already.
Burton. We're going in, he said into the Vox, then switched to speak to the rest of War Anvil's crew. All positions stand by to advance. Weapons ready. Colonel, the storm, called one of the crew, but he was not listening enough to even recognize their voice. Advance, he said. And a second later, War Anvil obeyed his will. The winds closed over them with fingers of air which slammed against the hull and rattled grit on the hatches. Within a minute, they could not see anything with their normal eyes except a swirling layer of dust the color of bruises. Images danced and collapsed on the Auspex screen. The infrasights showed nothing. Every few moments, lightning would split the view through the sight. War Anvil rocked as it ground onwards. Cord was breathing slowly, feeling his heart hammer as he waited for something to appear on the scope. The drill went silent. Harend felt the ground beneath his feet become still. He turned, suddenly aware that he had been drifting. Time had passed as the storm pulled at them. They were at its center, he was certain, but even here they felt its touch. The shapes of the other machines were unmoving, with billowing dust shrouding them and then revealing their shapes again. The heat signatures of each were a low murmur of brightness in his heat sight. The breath of the air was muted, hushed, waiting. Harend turned towards the excavator. The great machine was awake, its engine still turning. Cables connecting it to its drill head disappeared down a wide hole angled into the ground. They look slack, as though cut while under tension. "What is the drill status?" asked Horrend. "It is no longer functioning," said the monotone servitor.
to the truth of the universe, right? You should believe it. If you start to hesitate at that point, I think that the hesitation there, I feel like, is pointing at something. The reason why you're hesitating is because you've got a backwards-facing explanation for where your morality comes from, and now you've run into a thing where it doesn't seem like that explanation is fitting more. I think we're pretty intuitively oriented in a certain direction when it comes to morality, but he's asking kind of this question, but in not quite an edgy way.
Something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time?
So when you're talking about whims, I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature, you and I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides morality.
It's not a justification, it's a definition.
What's the difference then? Between a definition and a justification? I mean, it's ultimately psychologically the same thing.
Well, we have to define what we're talking about before we can just debate.
Okay, well,
right?
so here's my
I
position.
said that God, among other things...
I'm actually a non-theist. I'm not an atheist. I believe the human condition is one of uncertainty. And what that means is that I don't believe that you can conclude there is a God with certainty, and I don't believe that you can conclude that there is a God without him.
So he's an agnostic. He thinks agnosticism, I think, is a statement of like what kind of belief you can have about a God, and agnostic means that you believe that you can't have information about God, right?
In the same position. Now,
that's my understanding.
With that, I don't care. I still wake up every day and I have motivation to be a moral person.
Define moral.
Moral, what I ought to do.
Okay, how do you come to that
what I ought to
conclusion?
do, ultimately it comes down to what not just benefits me, but what benefits the entire planet, what benefits the entire system. I think that your entire moral perspective comes from linear thinking, and when you look at the reality of the universe, it's actually more so holistic. So when you look at how Aristotle defined God, when he said that there had to be an unmoved moved or an uncaused cause, he was defining God from a linear perspective, and you do the same with morality, and you do the same with purpose.
How does my definition of morality? How does my definition of morality hypothetically differ from yours?
Because you're saying that there's something that exists in a vacuum, that it exists in and of itself, and nothing in the universe exists in a vacuum. Nothing exists in and of itself. It's a whole systems-based morality. It's a systems-based reality,
Is there a
and that is
structure?
what the quantum.
Is there a hierarchical structure? Are some things more important than others?
Are some things? I think that some things lead to more benefits than others.
Then, by your own definition, some things are more important than others.
Yes.
Okay.
What is there? You've been voted out by the majority.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists, and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess
how is that relevant to this claim?
You're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
what typical Christians?
Yeah, typically when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in all-knowing.
How about Cardinal Newman, who defined
what typical Christians? Like, bro, come on, give me a fucking break.
God is conscience. He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that, Christian?
Euthyphro, yeah, whatever that guy's.
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circuit.
Kill me! Kill me! Kill me! Kill me! Kill me!
Notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean when you say you believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right, so if you believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it, and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not
Do you see he just did the Mona Lisa thing again there, right? Do you believe in something? Believe in it as in, I guess, have some mental state where you would assert a particular thing is true or exists, I guess. I don't know how you would, like, that's what you mean when you say you believe in something. But now he's like, a belief. He's like, do you believe in your country? Do you believe in these ideals that are worth dying for? Like, wait, what? Why did we just shift? Why did we pivot on what believe means there? We're clearly talking about something way different now.
Propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So
how would you define belief? Something you say?
Okay, so I explain. Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life?
Don't be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't
Oh my God, kill me.
lie to save my clinical practice.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
Can there ever be
Oh, wow. How clever that you can just define away all of the challenging questions. Nice. Good one.
circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like
Just do there's a super common challenge to deontologists about lying and a Nazi showing up at your door. Just give them that one.
in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic, and you have to protect them, would you lie to like the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with.
Oh my God, give me a f***ing break.
It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals?
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
What?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
that?
Like, that's an unconceivable hypothetical? You can't conceive of a situation where you might have to lie to protect. That's an inconceivable hypothetical to you. For the man who's explored so much theology, so much philosophy, engaged in so much conversation, it is inconceivable to, I can't even conceive of a situation where I might be able to lie for the benefit. That's an impossibility. Like, give me a break. Oh, like, this is so... It's not even performative. Or it's like performative Down syndrome. It's like so stupid. Like, what would it be like if your IQ was like 65, but you also had to LARP as a philosopher for a day? Like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Look, don't play games.
I'm not playing games.
Yes, you are. If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there, you...
Like, I think that he should own... This would be an interesting question to challenge that, because even Jordan Peterson doesn't believe that. Okay, so you're telling me that in that scenario, every single person that has to lie to protect a Jew, there has been a journey of moral failings up to that point? That any time you must lie to protect another person, it's always due to a personal moral failing to wind up in that situation? Like, what an absurd claim.
You've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people, like you're Jewish,
There you go.
I think you should just give up on that line of questioning.
Give up on
What do you mean give up? Oh my God, he's gonna virtue signal. He's gonna whip out the biggest virtue signal. Oh, kill me, dude.
just like trying to clarify your position. Because you're really uncomfortable being asking this question. It's just a basic hypothetical.
It's just a basic hypothetical where you put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just basic hypothetical.
It's a basic hypothetical question. The grandstanding. Kill me.
That's your life, but you're like not trying to answer this question.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Like,
Why are you asking that?
I was just asking.
Why would he ask that? I was a... Cringe pivot.
Just clarifying. But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in a
Obviously,
manner
that's
you
not what
don't
truth is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously, right? Logically, because that's already happened. Like, that's in the past. You don't have a time to travel device. We're bringing this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, people lie to save lives. Your definition of truth is actually believing it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask like people that using speech, so you have to answer the questions. And plain persons don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really want to. So
I can imagine that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could.
Oh, damn. Pearson ends. So he should rephrase that in a more in a place that has a higher level of conviction on the other side, right? So he just said it. So it's the moral failings that have led you to a place where you have to tell a lie if you had to protect a Jewish neighbor from Nazi. That's insane. That's such an insane thing. The issue is that I feel like this is only true if every single person around you is acting in a moral way. If you have people around you that are acting with malice or acting evilly, or with evil, I don't even say that telling a lie to an evil person is necessarily a moral failing in the same way that telling a lie, for your own benefit or whatever, to a good person.